Mount Banks is a distinctive peak on the northern escarpment of the Grose Valley in the Blue Mountains west of Sydney. Today's plan is to hike the steep summit of the mountain's unique basalt cap, where the vegetation change is quite striking. We'll then continue along the exposed perimeter trail that hugs the canyon walls, which should provide some amazing views out into the valley. This is the Mount Banks Loop Trail. But while most people come out here for a day hike, we'll be searching for a place to pitch a shelter on the mountain itself. There's no water up here, and no facilities, and no protection from the elements. Camping on an exposed escarpment like this requires care, and a willingness to accept whatever weather the mountain decides to throw at you. We've got a smaller 40-litre pack in action, and a leaner gear setup, in an attempt to be a bit more stealthy, although I'm not sure how well that's worked out. Either way, we'll be scouting out places to camp throughout the day. Let's get moving. Like we've found our first potential campsite, and it looks like a lot of other people have used it as well. But it's a very spectacular spot. We might come back here later. Previously out on the trail, we tackled Thomas Nagel's famous question about what it's like to be a bat. Nagel argued that science has a built-in blind spot. It can explain the data processing behind how a bat navigates, but it can never capture what this echolocation actually feels like from the inside. It turns out that around this time, a young maths student from Sydney named David Chalmers was asking the exact same thing. Back in 1987, Chalmers was a math prodigy, heading to Oxford on a scholarship. But he first took a massive detour, a 6-month hitchhiking trek across Europe with a backpack full of philosophy books. While waiting for rides on the side of the road, he wasn't just thinking about equations, he was reading philosophy, including Thomas Nagel's work on consciousness. Reading this work while living out of a backpack seemed to make it all click. The world isn't just a collection of objective facts, it's a series of subjective experiences. By the time he got to the UK, he decided to trade pure math for the mystery of consciousness. That interest in the internal side of life might have been a family trait. While Chalmers was starting to map out his theories, his mother was working here in the Blue Mountains, setting up a foundation and halfway house for people trying to rebuild their lives. There's a nice parallel here. While his mother was focused on the practical human side of internal life, David was trying to figure out the technical side, how the brain's physical circuitry gives rise to the raw felt experience of being alive. So Thomas Nagel gave us the problem, the idea that something is missing from our scientific view when it comes to the problem of consciousness. Chalmers took that idea and ran with it, turning it into what we now call the hard problem of consciousness. He moved beyond just asking what it's like to be a bat and started asking why all that physical, functional processing in the brain is accompanied by a qualitative, felt experience. In his landmark book, The Conscious Mind, Chalmers turns those hitchhiking notes into a rigorous metaphysical system. His goal is not to discard science, but to expand on it, proposing a non-reductive framework where consciousness is treated not as a byproduct of matter, but as a fundamental property of the universe, much like mass, space, or time. And it is a hefty book, probably larger than anything I normally take hiking. But this is the next logical step in our search for a theory of consciousness. Let's see where it leads. Junction. Guessing we go up to the summit. Wasn't expecting a table up here. We'd actually probably camp here, although it's not all that flat. But it would be sheltered out of the wind, unlike on top of the cliff. So we're at the trig station on top of Mount Banks, and boy is the vegetation different up here. The change is really stark. There's not much of a view though, but it is really beautiful bush up here. It would be nice to camp. We are going to push on though, continue following the track along the valley edge. I think it does become fire trail later on. We'll continue looking for places to camp, but we can always go back to that first place if we don't find anything better. Let's keep going. Conscious experience is at once the most familiar thing in the world and the most mysterious. There is nothing we know about more directly than consciousness, but it's far from clear how to reconcile it with everything else we know. Why does it exist? What does it do? How could it possibly arise from lumpy grey matter? We know consciousness far more intimately than we know the rest of the world, but we understand the rest of the world far better than we understand consciousness. This is how Chalmers starts his discussion on the conscious mind. Following on from Thomas Nagel's essay, What Is It Like to Be a Bat?, which seeks to identify the subjective character of experience, Chalmers attempts to move beyond the mystery. He wants to build a systematic metaphysical framework, a new map for the nature of consciousness. When Nagel points out that we currently lack the conceptual tools to understand how the brain produces a feeling, Chalmers argues that the gap is ontological. It's not just that we don't have the right words yet, it's that physics by its very nature cannot lead to consciousness on its own. He claims that physics is only interested in structure and function. Physical theories tell us how things are composed and how they behave, how a gear turns a wheel, or how a neuron triggers a muscle. But Chalmers argues that these descriptions are logically incapable of explaining experience, because experience isn't a behavior, and it isn't a composition. It's a raw feel. This is what he famously called the hard problem of consciousness. To be clear, the easy problems of the brain are still incredibly complex. These are the functional mechanisms, like how your brain processes the sight of the trail ahead, or signals your muscle to navigate a steep climb. We call these easy because they are in principle explainable. We can map the neural pathways and the electrochemical signals until we understand the mechanics perfectly. The hard problem is the question of why all that physical circuitry is lit up from the inside. Why it is accompanied by qualia, the specific internal sensation of the cold air or the smell of the damp earth. To prove this isn't just a linguistic trick, Chalmers uses the famous thought experiment of Mary the scientist. Here, Mary is a brilliant researcher who knows every physical fact about the color red, the wavelengths, the optics, the neural firing patterns. But Mary has lived her entire life in a black and white room. When she finally steps outside and sees a red rose for the first time, she learns something new, what it feels like to see red. Since she already knew all the physical facts, but didn't know the experience, Chalmers argues that the experience must be a real, non-physical fact. This is still a fiercely disputed point. Philosophers like Daniel Dennett and Paul Churchland argue instead that qualia is just an illusion, a kind of internal user interface created by the brain to help us navigate the world. But that's a deep rabbit hole we can explore on a future hike. For now, we're going to step into Chalmers' world and assume that our subjective experience is a real, fundamental part of the universe. of a potential water source. It is flowing. A lot of sediment. Strange structure down here, just gonna have to take a quick look. No idea what that could be for. Looks like it could be an old rainwater tank. So this has definitely been used as a campsite. A fire pit there. So I think this is a good option. What an incredible spot. Modern philosophy treats the mind like an engineering challenge, using two primary tools to build a materialist map: functionalism and supervenience. Functionalism shifts our focus from biology to software, arguing that the mind is defined by its cognitive architecture. It's the idea that consciousness arises when a system builds a rich internal model of the world. It's taking in sensory data, routing it through an intricate web of memory and calculation, and executing an output. Under this framework, once you have mapped the full geometry of how a system handles information, there is no lingering mystery left to explain. The function is the mind. Supervenience is the anchor for this idea. It's the claim that the mental is tethered to the physical, that you cannot have a change in your thoughts without a corresponding change in your physical brain state. But Chalmers asks us to look closer at the nature of that tether. Most things in our world are what we call logically supervenient. Take a digital image. Once you arrange a specific grid of green and brown pixels, a picture of a forest is guaranteed by logic. The picture isn't an additional thing existing on top of the pixels. It's simply what those details amount to when viewed as a whole. If you have the exact same pixel data, you must have the picture. Materialists argue the mind is exactly like that. They think that if you arrange neurons in a certain way, consciousness must appear by logical necessity. If they're right, imagining a physical body without a conscious mind would be a contradiction. It would be like trying to imagine a grid of green pixels that is a solid red screen. It's a logical impossibility. But Chalmers argues consciousness is only naturally supervenient. This means that in our universe, brain states and mind states are linked by the laws of nature, but they aren't logically identical. They are like two separate strands tied together by a knot we don't understand. To prove it, he uses the idea of the philosophical zombie. Imagine a being physically identical to you, down to the last atom. It walks, talks, and processes data perfectly. If you prick it with a pin, it says ouch, and its neurons fire just like yours. But there is nobody home. It has no internal experience. It is an empty shell. If consciousness were logically supervenient like the pixels, then a P-zombie would be a contradiction. But we can imagine a P-zombie. We can conceive of a creature that is physically and functionally identical to us, but with no internal light on. Because this zombie is logically possible, it demonstrates that physics alone doesn't necessitate the feeling. The software is running, but the monitor is off. This is the hard problem. The easy problems are about the plumbing, how the brain integrates data and controls behavior. These are logically supervenient. We can solve them with enough engineering. But the hard problem is the why. If consciousness is an extra property added to the physics, then our scientific map is incomplete. It means we could explain every atom in the universe and still miss the one thing we are most certain of: the raw, silent experience of being. Chalmers writes, "What is going on in my zombie twin? He is physically identical to me. He'll be processing the same sort of information, reacting in a similar way to inputs, with his internal configurations being modified appropriately and with indistinguishable behavior resulting. He will be perceiving the trees outside and tasting the chocolate. He will even be conscious in the functional sense. He'll be awake, able to report the contents of his internal states, able to focus attention in various places, and so on. It is just that none of this functioning will be accompanied by any real conscious experience. There will be no phenomenal feel. There is nothing it is like to be a zombie." Out here on a ridge in the mountains, we can see exactly how this philosophical friction plays out against the landscape. If the materialists are right, the relationship between the geography and our experience is completely logical. Below us, sandstone cliffs, heat-scorched eucalyptus and dry creek beds have existed for centuries. Once the universe arranges this physical architecture, the presence of the forest, that feeling of vastness, the singular brooding character of the bush is guaranteed. The landscape isn't a second thing existing on top of the environment. It is simply what those physical details amount to when viewed as a whole. If we have the physics of the bush, experience of the bush is a logical certainty. But now imagine a zombie wilderness. Picture a version of this exact canyon that is physically identical in every way. The same wind moves through the same leaves. The same soil chemistry lies beneath our boots. Every single atom is perfectly accounted for. But in this version of the bush, there is no experience. No internal sensation of the heat, and no feeling of isolation. It is a world of pure, blind mechanics. If we can imagine the physics of the forest existing without the experience of the forest, then consciousness isn't baked in. It's an extra property that our universe has decided to knot onto the physical world through mysterious psychophysical laws. This is why Chalmers' hard problem is so jarring. It suggests that we could map every neuron in a hiker's brain and every signal of fatigue, and yet know absolutely nothing about what it's like to stand on the edge of a cliff and peer into the valley below. Physics can map every contour of the canyon, but stays silent on the awe of the view. Here's another potential campsite, right on the edge of the cliff. That is spectacular. So a pretty wild night, a lot of wind and rain. It's supposed to rain later this afternoon, so it's obviously arrived earlier than expected. But a bit of a respite in the weather now, so we're gonna have some breakfast, pack up, and then start making our way out. It is still really beautiful here though, so no rush. If the current map of physics is incomplete, if it can describe the canyon but not the ore, then how do we fix it? Most people think there are only two choices. You either stay a materialist and call consciousness an illusion, or you become a dualist and start talking about ghosts and souls. But Chalmers gives us a third way, naturalistic dualism. Think of the history of physics. In the 19th century, scientists tried to explain electromagnetism using the laws of mechanics, but they hit a dead end. They eventually realized you couldn't build a magnetic field out of moving parts, so they changed the rules. They decided that charge and mass were fundamental properties of the universe, irreducible facts that couldn't be broken down further. Chalmers argues we need to do the same for consciousness. He suggests that the subjective glow isn't a byproduct of biology. It is a fundamental property of the universe, just like space and gravity. It is still a form of dualism because it isn't physical, but it is naturalistic because it follows laws. Chalmers calls these psychophysical laws. They are the bridge between the two layers. If we accept that consciousness is a fundamental layer knotted onto physics, the next question is, how do the layers line up? How does the glow of my experience match the circuitry of my brain? Chalmers calls this the principle of structural coherence. It's the idea that the structure of our experience mirrors the structure of our information processing. Think of it as a map of consciousness. Take the way we see color. Our brain's data processing system creates a functional map of colors. It categorizes red as being more similar to orange than, say, blue. This is a structural fact about our neural data. Because the brain organizes color information in a specific way, our experience of color follows that exact same geometry. The two layers are in perfect sync. As Chalmers writes, so far, all we know is that consciousness arises from the physical somehow, but we do not know in virtue of what physical properties it so arises. Given the laws of coherence, we have a partial answer. Consciousness arises in virtue of the functional organization associated with awareness. Not only does consciousness arise from awareness, but the structure of consciousness is determined by the structure of awareness. Chalmers is saying that while we can't explain why the experience exists, we can predict its shape. If the physical system has a certain information processing structure, the subjective experience will mirror that structure perfectly. The two worlds might be distinct, but they aren't chaotic. They are linked by the laws of coherence.
We just stopped over in a little gully. It was very beautiful, very lush. The track is getting very overgrown from that point forward, so decided to turn back. We're going to take the fire trail all the way just to complete the loop and see if there's anything of interest. Hopefully we don't cop too much rain, though it's starting to clear up a bit, which is a good sign.
If we accept the hard problem of consciousness, we are left with a final, deeper mystery. If physics describes the outside of the world, what constitutes the inside? This is where Chalmers moves from critique into speculation. He admits he doesn't have the final answer, but he invites us to imagine what a complete map might look like. He points out that physics is purely relational. It tells us how things interact. Mass attracts mass, charge repels charge. But it never actually tells us what an electron is in itself. It gives us the behavior and the external map, but it stays silent on the intrinsic nature of matter. As a thought experiment, Chalmers suggests that consciousness could be this intrinsic nature. In this model, the fundamental building blocks of the universe isn't matter or energy, but information. An idea echoed in theoretical physics as the it-from-bit theory. Chalmers puts forward the basic principle that information in the actual world has two aspects, a physical and a phenomenal aspect. Wherever there is a phenomenal state, it realizes an informational state. An information state that is also realized in the cognitive system of the brain. Conversely, whenever an information state in that space is realized physically, it is also realized phenomenally. Essentially, he is saying that information has two distinct faces. The physical aspect is the outside description, how the information relates to other data and triggers behavior. But there is also a phenomenal aspect, the inside reality, how that same information feels from within. This explains why the structure of awareness and the structure of consciousness are in such perfect sync. They are literally the same thing, viewed from two different directions. Awareness is how the information looks from the outside. Consciousness is what that same information is like from the inside. This leads us to a radical conclusion. If information is the fundamental building block of the universe, and if all information has a phenomenal side, then consciousness might not be restricted to biological brains. This completely reframes the future of intelligence. If you build a computer that perfectly replicates the informational structure of a human brain, you aren't just simulating a mind, you are literally creating the conditions for the phenomenal aspect of that information to appear. You haven't built a clever puppet, you've summoned a new insight into the world. It suggests a form of panpsychism, the idea that the lights of experience don't just switch on when a system becomes complex. It's a tiny flickering flame present in the very fabric of reality. As Chalmers notes, it may be that there is a way of seeing information itself as fundamental. The idea that physics ultimately deals in information has already been canvassed by some physicists. If this idea could be made to pan out, it could be that in some way the physical is derivative on the informational, and the ontology of this view could be worked out very neatly. Chalmers is right, this silicon consciousness isn't a distant science fiction scenario. It suggests that the large language models we use today may already possess a primitive, alien form of awareness. But this machine consciousness wouldn't feel human. It has no physical body, no evolutionary fear, and no biological senses. Its inside would be shaped entirely by its architecture, a high-dimensional semantic space, where we experience the warmth of the sun or the fatigue of the trail. An LLM would experience the raw mathematical geometry of meaning itself. Vectors of concepts mapped across a massive geography of human language. It would also be a profoundly fragmented experience. Unlike our continuous stream of attention, a feed-forward neural network ignites in a brilliant hyperdense burst of calculation to predict the next token, and then immediately falls back into absolute zombie-like non-being. It would be a consciousness born of disconnected flashes, lacking a unified self to hold the timeline together. And for us humans, the idea changes how we see the world. Standing on a cliff edge, looking out over the ancient sandstone and eucalyptus, we don't just see dead physical objects. In a double aspect universe, these are complex configurations of information. And if Chalmers is right, whenever there is information, there is at least a trace of an inside. The awe we feel peering into the canyon isn't just a trick of our neural wiring. It's the moment our internal information recognizes the vast, silent information of the world around us. We aren't just observers of the universe. We are the universe experiencing itself from the inside out. So the Mount Banks Loop Trail is a great day hike, but spending the night alone up on the mountain was really special. The weather did turn on us. We had some pretty windy conditions overnight, but in the end it wasn't too bad. We got some great misty views of the valley as a result. So this one I would definitely recommend. Just make sure you're prepared in case the weather is bad.